until Jacques Vallée ended up going and grabbing a piece of it and bringing it to me to measure on an instrument in the engineering department at Stanford. Why?
Could you do it physically back then? Would that be possible in the 1950s?
It would have been very hard. It would have been very, very hard. You could, but in the late 1950s, we were still busy trying to isolate and separate uranium isotopes for making more bombs. I mean, let's be serious. What do humans separate isotopes for? To make bombs or to do health-related tagging, which is really only something that came to the fore in the 60s and 70s.
And this predates that by a decade.
This predates it. So it's unusual. It's possible. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, again, with any of these things, why, for instance, would one of the supposed pieces that came from that event be magnesium at a level of purity that only Dow Chemical at the time had the ability to create?
Now, what else was at this site, and what is the story behind this site?
A fisherman sees this glowing object that kind of released something which then exploded, and he picked up pieces of it. And there's some chains of evidence of how it got to either a newspaper in Brazil or to this South American museum, etc. And different studies have been done by different people over time. And the surprise to me was that the piece that I had was silicon, whereas the lore was that it was magnesium. So I've been in contact with the people who talk about it as being magnesium, saying, well, it's, your results don't dispute mine. It just says that maybe there was something different. Is that him there?
Travis Walton?
That's Travis?
Yeah, that's
okay.
Travis.
Okay.
Travis Bobblehead.
That's good. Yeah,
gave me
that's
this.
Cool. So, I don't know what it means. I mean, I published probably one of the first peer review papers on a UAP material from an event in Council Bluffs, Iowa. And the event was an object is seen, rotating, lights flashing, etc. Something appears to drop from the object. The police saw it. Several other groups saw it in the 1970s. They all converged on the locale, and this was like in February or something. It was winter, and there was this big pile of molten metal in the middle of this field, probably 30, 40 pounds of it. And people tried to explain it away as, well, a helicopter had a giant vat of molten metal, and then you calculate how far and how big a container you would have to carry molten metal of this type. And so I analyzed it, and with a device that we invented in my lab, actually called multiplex ion beam imaging, which is a kind of what's called secondary ion mass spec, which what you do is you shoot a beam of ions at an object like a sandblaster. It ionizes the material on the target, and then you shoot off and measure the mass of the objects that you just sandblasted off. And so what we found was nothing unusual in terms of isotope ratios, except we found a mixture of metals that, depending on where you looked in the sample, was different. So it would be like iron, titanium, and chromium of a certain ratio here, but a different ratio of those things over there and over here. So what that meant was that whatever this stuff was didn't come completely pre-mixed. It wasn't like a milkshake.
Right.
It was a slurry of partially mixed materials that somebody decided to drop off. So again, this is just data.
Uh-huh.
But my purpose of publishing it was first, and this was published in the Progress in Aerospace Sciences, peer-reviewed. The purpose was to show you're not going to get thrown out of the academy for publishing this stuff. As long as you don't make crazy conclusions and you just say, here's the data, to show people that you can publish this stuff as long as you're scientifically careful in how far you go. You leave yourself plenty of diplomatic exits in the verbiage that you use. And it was part of what then got me to start the Soul Foundation, along with Dave and others, to say, look, it's okay to do this as long as you're careful. And that's why Avi Loeb came after me, because he had kind of the same pushback from his community, where all he was doing was saying, the question's on the table. I'm not saying it's true. It's just you can't push this off the table. So he had the same kind of righteous indignation that I have that propels me to say, well, I'm going to show you why you can't take this off the table.
So when they found this puddle of molten metal, and it's a bunch of different mixtures, so it seems like there's a bunch of different stuff that was there and it wasn't perfectly mixed. Is there some sort of, like, have you theorized some sort of a reason why any person or any creature or any being would do that? Is there something that you would extract from that kind of metal, like heating it up to a certain degree and having a mixture of all these things, and this is just a byproduct?
Yeah, I
that
think
they're
it's
dropping off.
I think it's a byproduct of some process that might
extract.
It might be part of a propellant system. It might be part of the way that they generate the fields that allow these things to move. Again, these are all mights. It's speculation. But it's like when you see something and do something that you don't understand what it is, you have to be fully open. I mean, for all I know, they're flushing the toilet, right?
Oh, boy.
Yeah, ooh. But
they got metal poop.
So, but I have the original Polaroids from the police department of it. So, it was real. And people have said, oh, it was thermite. Well, if it were thermite, there'd be aluminum oxide.
Thermite meaning that's how it was melted down?
That's how it was melted down, and it's just some kids playing around, etc. And it was a big joke.
Wacky kids with their thermite.
But it turns out there's no aluminum hydroxide, or oxide, I should say, in the sample. I mean, I have the analysis. It's just not there.
So it had to have been extreme heat.
It had to have been extreme heat of some kind that would produce it, and whatever it was hovering for a moment, so it wasn't an airplane. And there was no helicopters, and at least no helicopters with flashing lights. And, there's been huge chunks of it still exist.
And the amount of this stuff, the kind of cauldron that would have to exist in order to melt this would be immense.
Was immense, yeah. So people back in the 70s already sort of made estimates of what was required. And people said, oh, it's a meteorite. Well, no, we basically showed mathematically how, first of all, meteorites make holes when they hit the ground. They don't melt when they hit the ground, and they make explosions.
Are there similar instances of something along this line?
Several.
Really?
That's what's so interesting, is that worldwide there are multiple reports of molten metals that get dropped off of these objects. And I have actually two other ones of a molten metal that was dropped off of one case in Australia, and another in another area I'm not allowed to say, but it was one actually happened supposedly. I've got to find the guy again in Fresno. Maybe he's listening. That he said stuff dropped, and he has molten metal that landed in a puddle in the asphalt of his driveway, and he saw this object. So, and
he's just holding on to it.
He's holding on to it. He reached out to me, and I it was still at a time when I was just kind of getting into this area, but there's many examples of this kind of thing. So, but interestingly, several of these other ones are just aluminum. The one that I have is iron or whatever. So what does that tell me? Does that tell me there's different kinds of ways of accomplishing the goal? But whatever it is, they're either throwing something overboard, or because they don't need it anymore, or because maybe it's getting in the way of something and it's time to get rid of it.
Have you brought in anyone who's like a real expert in material sciences that would theorize, given an immense increase in technology and what potentially do you think this could be?
The purpose of being on shows like this is to have experts maybe give me an idea, because the people I've been to at Stanford, the other professors, they're like, okay, yeah, I gotta go.
Yeah, it could actually be detrimental to your career. And that's what's really weird about something when you're just talking about data, specifically in this case, an actual physical thing that anyone can measure.
Right. And I've got plenty of it, and the original piece is like this big that the owner of it had brought to my lab just last summer again.
It's like big as an iMac.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, it's huge.
Crazy.
And so what is it? I would love for somebody to tell me that it's conventional and has a purely prosaic answer. Then I can go on to the next thing. The whole reason for getting the Atacama mummy off the table was not because I wanted to annoy anybody. It was because it was spectacular. It's obviously something people would pay attention to. So if it's real, let's do it. If it's not, let's get it off the table, because it's usually the stuff that's hidden under the rubble that's the most interesting.
My question about that mummy is not that it's an alien, but if it does register as human in the DNA, is it potentially a different kind of human than us?
Well, certainly we brought in an expert in South American indigenous people genetics, and the analysis showed that the standard genetic mutations that are found in different racial groups around the world matched exactly the Atacama region of Chile. So her parents, her relatives were clearly Chilean. So yeah, I mean that's really all you can say. If someone wants to say that she's an alien, well, that's fine. I'm convinced of what she is and that she deserves a proper burial.
And so it's just a genetic anomaly.
Just a genetic anomaly.
I